The wind howled through the pines like a wounded animal, carrying with it the bitter sting of Colorado snow. Eleanor Hartley pressed her thin shawl tighter against her chest, her fingers already numb despite the worn gloves she wore. The wagon had stopped moving 10 minutes ago, and her stepfather, Vernon Cobb, hadn't said a word since. She knew what was coming. She'd known for weeks, ever since he'd married that woman in Denver, Constance. Young, pretty, and venomous as a rattlesnake. There wasn't room for both of them in Vernon's new life, and Eleanor had always been the inconvenience. "Get out," Vernon said, his voice flat as the frozen ground beneath them. Eleanor's heart stuttered. "What? You heard me. Get out of the wagon. Vernon, please. It's 20 miles to the nearest town. The snow ain't my problem anymore." He turned to face her, his weathered face showing no emotion. "Your mama's been dead 3 years. I don't owe you nothing. Constance don't want you around, and frankly, neither do I." Eleanor's throat tightened. She'd nursed this man through fever 2 winters ago. She cooked his meals, mended his clothes, asked for nothing but a roof over her head. And now, at 22 years old, she was being discarded like yesterday's newspaper. "I have no money, no food. I'll die out here." Vernon shrugged. "That's God's business, not mine. Now get out before I throw you out." Eleanor's hands trembled as she climbed down from the wagon. The snow immediately soaked through her worn boots. She had nothing but the thin dress on her back, the inadequate shawl, and the small canvas bag that held her mother's Bible and a change of undergarments. Vernon didn't look at her as he snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward, and within moments it disappeared into the swirling white curtain of snow. Eleanor stood there, alone, in the vast wilderness, watching her only connection to civilization vanish. The temperature was dropping fast. Night would come in a few hours, and with it, certain death. She started walking. There was nothing else to do. One foot in front of the other, even as the wind cut through her like a knife, even as her toes went numb and her lips turned blue, even as her vision started to blur. She thought of her mother, sweet, gentle Maria, who died of consumption 3 winters past. "I'm sorry, Mama," Eleanor whispered through chattering teeth. "I tried to be strong like you wanted." The world tilted. Eleanor's legs gave out, and she crumpled into a snowdrift. The cold didn't hurt anymore. That was probably bad, she thought distantly. She could barely keep her eyes open. This is how it ends, she thought. Alone in the snow, just another forgotten soul the frontier swallowed up. Through the haze of approaching unconsciousness, she heard something. Hoofbeats. But that couldn't be right. No one traveled these mountain passes in winter storms. She must be hallucinating. The hoofbeats grew louder. A dark shape loomed over her, massive against the white sky. "Jesus Christ!" a deep voice rumbled. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, and Eleanor tried to focus on the face above hers. A man, huge, dark beard crusted with ice, eyes the color of pine trees, face carved from granite. A mountain of a man dressed in thick furs and wool. "Please," she managed to whisper. "Help me." "I got you," the man said, and his voice was surprisingly gentle for someone so intimidating. "You're safe now." He lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against a chest as solid as an oak tree. Eleanor felt herself being placed on a horse, felt the man swing up behind her, his massive frame surrounding her like a living shield against the wind. "Stay awake," he commanded, his breath warm against her frozen ear. "Talk to me. What's your name?" "Eleanor," she stammered. "Eleanor. Good. I'm Garrett. Garrett Bishop. You're gonna be fine, Eleanor. My cabin's just 2 miles up. Can you hold on that long?" She nodded against his chest, and he spurred the horse forward. Garrett kept talking to her, his deep voice a lifeline in the storm. "What the hell were you doing out here alone?" he asked. "My stepfather left me." Garrett's body went rigid behind her. "He what?" "Didn't want me anymore. New wife." The curse that rumbled out of Garrett made Eleanor's eyes widen, even in her half-frozen state. She'd never heard such colorful language. "I'm going to remember that," Garrett said grimly. "What's his name?" "Vernon Cobb." Vernon Cobb," Garrett repeated, like he was filing it away for future reference. "We'll deal with him later. Right now, let's get you warm." True to his word, the cabin appeared through the trees within minutes. It was small but solid, built from thick logs with smoke curling from a stone chimney. Garrett dismounted and lifted Eleanor down, carrying her inside without hesitation. The interior was sparse but clean. A large fireplace dominated one wall, already burning with hot coals. A single bed in the corner, a rough-hewn table, shelves with supplies. The home of a man who lived alone and preferred it that way. Garrett laid Eleanor on a rug near the fire and immediately began stoking the flames higher. "We need to get you out of these wet clothes," he said, not looking at her. "You'll catch your death otherwise." Eleanor's teeth were chattering too hard to respond. Garrett moved to a trunk in the corner and pulled out what looked like a thick flannel shirt and wool trousers. "These'll be too big," he said, "but they're dry and warm. Can you manage yourself? Or do you need help?" I can't feel my fingers," Eleanor admitted. Garrett knelt beside her, his expression serious. "I'm going to help you then. I'll be respectful. You have my word." Eleanor nodded. She didn't have much choice, and something about this giant, gruff man made her trust him. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he removed her sodden shawl and began unbuttoning her dress. He kept his eyes averted, working by feel more than sight, and when her dress was off, he quickly wrapped her in a thick blanket before helping her into his dry clothes. The shirt hung on her like a tent, and the trousers had to be rolled up several times, but they were gloriously warm and dry. Garrett produced thick wool socks and helped her put them on, rubbing her frozen feet between his large, calloused hands. "The feeling will come back," he said quietly. "It's gonna hurt when it does." He was right. As Eleanor's body slowly warmed, sensation returned with a vengeance. Her fingers and toes burned like they were on fire, and she couldn't stop the tears that leaked from her eyes. "I know," Garrett murmured, still rubbing her feet. "I know it hurts. You're doing good, Eleanor. Real good." When the worst of the pain had passed, Garrett wrapped her in another blanket and carried her to his bed. "You sleep here," he said. "I'll take the floor." "I can't take your bed," Eleanor protested weakly. "You can, and you will." His tone brooked no argument. "You need rest and warmth. Don't worry about me. I've slept in worse places." He placed her gently on the mattress, which smelled of pine and leather, and something uniquely masculine. Then he pulled the thick quilts up to her chin and added another log to the fire. "There's stew on the fire," he said. "When you wake up, you'll eat. Understood?" Eleanor nodded, already feeling sleep pulling at her. "Garrett," he turned back, one eyebrow raised. "Thank you for saving my life." Something flickered in those green eyes, something lonely and sad and surprised all at once. "Get some rest, Eleanor." She slept for 14 hours straight. When Eleanor finally woke, it was to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Grey morning light filtered through the single window, and she could hear the wind still howling outside. The storm hadn't passed. She sat up slowly, testing her body. Everything ached, but she was alive. Her fingers and toes were tender but functional. She'd been incredibly lucky. Garrett stood at the stove, his back to her. He was even bigger than she'd thought, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that looked like they could carry a wagon. His dark hair was tied back with a leather cord, and even from behind, he radiated quiet strength. "You're awake," he said without turning around. "Good. Come eat." Eleanor wrapped the blanket around herself and padded over to the table. Garrett set down a plate piled with bacon, eggs, and thick slices of bread. Her stomach growled loudly. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked, taking a seat across from her with his own plate. 2 days ago," Eleanor admitted. "Vernon didn't believe in wasting food on me toward the end." Garrett's jaw tightened, but he didn't comment. "Eat," he said simply. Eleanor didn't need to be told twice. The food was simple but delicious, and she ate until her stomach felt ready to burst. Garrett watched her with an expression that might have been approval. "Better?" he asked when she'd finally pushed her plate away. "Much better, thank you." Eleanor studied him across the table. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly. He was probably in his early 30s, with a face that was more rugged than handsome, marked by a scar along his left jaw. His hands were huge and scarred, the hands of a man who'd worked hard his entire life. But his eyes were kind, she noticed. Watchful and wary, but kind. "You live up here alone?" she asked. 5 years now," Garrett said, sipping his coffee. "Bought this land after the war, run a small herd of cattle in the summer, trap in the winter. Don't need much, and I don't want company." The message was clear. Eleanor's heart sank. "I understand. As soon as the storm passes, I'll head to town. Find work somewhere." "Doing what?" Garrett's eyes were sharp. "You got any skills?" "I can cook, clean, sew. I can read and write. I'm strong, even if I don't look it." "Nearest town is Silver Pine," Garrett said. 23 miles down the mountain. Population about 200, mostly miners and prospectors. You know what kind of work a woman with no family finds in a mining town. Eleanor's face flushed. She knew exactly what he was implying. I'll find something respectable. Maybe. Maybe not. Garrett stood and poured himself more coffee. Storm's gonna last another 2-3 days. After that, snow'll be too deep to travel for at least a week. You're stuck here whether we like it or not. I'm sorry to impose. Didn't say I minded. Garrett turned to face her, leaning against the counter. Said you're stuck. Big difference. While you're here, you pull your weight. Cook, clean, whatever needs doing. Fair? Eleanor nodded quickly. More than fair. I'll earn my keep, I promise. Good. Garrett's expression softened slightly. And Eleanor, stop apologizing for existing. Ain't your fault you got dealt a bad hand. Something in Eleanor's chest loosened at those words. When was the last time someone had spoken to her with simple kindness, without expecting something in return? Thank you, she whispered. Garrett nodded and turned back to the stove, but Eleanor caught the slight flush on his neck. Maybe this mountain man wasn't as immune to human connection as he pretended to be. The storm raged for 3 days, just as Garrett predicted. During that time, Eleanor fell into an easy routine. She woke early, made breakfast, tidied the cabin while Garrett went out to check on his animals in the barn. She'd mend his clothes, which desperately needed a woman's touch, and prepare hearty meals that made Garrett's eyes widen with appreciation. Haven't eaten like this in years, he admitted on the 3rd night, helping himself to a second portion of venison stew. You're a terrible cook, Eleanor said, smiling. How have you survived? Stubbornness mostly, Garrett almost smiled back. Almost. And my stews ain't that bad. They're edible, barely. Woman, you're getting mighty confident for someone who was near froze to death 3 days ago. But there was no heat in his words, and Eleanor laughed. It felt good to laugh. She couldn't remember the last time she had. Garrett watched her with an odd expression. You got a pretty laugh, he said gruffly. Should do it more often. Eleanor's breath caught. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, warmer. Garrett seemed to realize what he'd said and stood abruptly, grabbing his coat. Gonna check the barn one more time, he muttered, and fled into the night. Eleanor sat at the table, her heart beating faster than it should. This was dangerous territory. Garrett Bishop was her savior, her temporary host, nothing more. She couldn't afford to develop feelings for a man who'd made it clear he preferred solitude. But oh, it was hard not to notice him, the way he moved. All controlled power, the gentleness in those big hands when he'd helped her, the rumble of his voice in the early morning, the way he looked at her sometimes like she was something precious he didn't dare touch. Stop it, Eleanor told herself firmly. You're being foolish. But her heart didn't seem to be listening. On the 4th morning, Eleanor woke to silence. The wind had stopped. She got up and peered out the window to see brilliant sunshine sparkling on fresh snow. The storm had passed. Garrett was already up, standing outside in the knee-deep snow, staring toward the mountain pass. Eleanor wrapped herself in a shawl and joined him. It's beautiful, she breathed. It's deadly, Garrett corrected. Snow's too deep for travel. Even with snowshoes, you wouldn't make it a mile. We're snowed in for at least 2 weeks, maybe more. 2 weeks. Alone in this cabin with Garrett Bishop. Eleanor's pulse quickened. I see, she said carefully. I'll try not to be too much of a burden. Garrett turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Eleanor, you ain't a burden. That ain't what worries me. What does worry you? He looked away. Forget I said anything. Come on, let's get breakfast started. But Eleanor couldn't forget. She thought about it all day as she worked. What had he meant? What worried him about her being here? That evening as they sat by the fire after supper, the tension between them was palpable. Garrett sat in his chair, pretending to read an old newspaper, while Eleanor mended one of his shirts. The silence stretched. Garrett? Eleanor finally said, Why do you live up here alone? A man like you could have a wife, a family. Garrett's hands tightened on the newspaper. I did have a wife and a daughter. Eleanor's heart clenched. What happened? Cholera, 7 years ago. His voice was flat, emotionless. Rebecca was 26. Little Sarah was only 3. They died within a day of each other. I couldn't save them. Oh, Garrett, I'm so sorry. After they died, I couldn't stay in town. Couldn't look at other families, other children. So I came up here. Been here ever since. Eleanor set down her mending. You've been alone for 7 years. Prefer it that way? Do you really? Eleanor asked softly. Or is it just easier than risking your heart again? Garrett's eyes snapped to hers, and the pain in them took her breath away. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I lost my mother 3 years ago. She was all I had. When she died, I wanted to die too, but I didn't. I kept going, kept hoping that maybe someday. She trailed off. Maybe someday what? Maybe someday I'd find a reason to live again. To be happy again. Garrett stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood abruptly. I'm going to bed. Garrett. Good night, Eleanor. He retreated to his bedroll by the fire, turning his back to her. Eleanor sat in the chair, staring at his rigid form. She touched a nerve, opened a wound that had never properly healed. But maybe, she thought, some wounds needed to be reopened before they could heal right. The next few days were awkward. Garrett avoided being alone with her as much as possible, spending long hours in the barn or checking his trap lines. Eleanor tried to give him space while still maintaining the cabin, but the cabin was small, and they couldn't avoid each other forever. It came to a head one evening when Eleanor was trying to reach a jar on the top shelf. She stood on her tiptoes, fingers just brushing the glass, when strong hands suddenly gripped her waist. Let me, Garrett rumbled from behind her. He was so close, Eleanor could feel the heat of him through her dress. His hands, large and warm, held her steady as he reached past her to grab the jar. For a moment, they stood frozen, his chest against her back, his breath stirring her hair. Garrett, Eleanor whispered. I know, he said roughly. God help me, I know. He stepped back quickly, setting the jar on the counter with a thud. Eleanor turned to face him, and the look in his eyes made her knees weak. This can't happen, Garrett said, but he wasn't moving away. You're young, you're beautiful. You deserve better than a broken-down mountain man with nothing to offer. You saved my life, Eleanor said. You've been nothing but kind to me. You're not broken, Garrett. You're just hurt. Same thing. No, it's not. Eleanor took a step toward him. Broken can't be fixed. Hurt can heal. Eleanor, don't what? Don't tell you that I feel safe with you, that I haven't felt safe in years. Don't tell you that when you look at me, I feel seen for the first time in my life. You don't know what you're saying. I'm 22 years old, not a child. I know my own heart. Garrett's jaw worked. You've been through trauma. You're grateful. That's all. Once you get to town, meet other men. I don't want other men, Eleanor said, her voice stronger than she felt. I want you. The words hung in the air between them. Garrett stared at her like she'd sprouted a second head. You can't mean that, he said hoarsely. Why not? You're good, you're kind, you're strong. You make me feel protected. You make me laugh. When I'm with you, I don't feel alone anymore. Eleanor. She closed the distance between them, placing her small hand on his broad chest. His heart hammered beneath her palm. I'm not asking you to love me, she said quietly. I know you loved your wife and I would never try to replace her. But maybe we could both be a little less lonely together. Garrett's hand came up to cover hers. You don't understand what you're offering. Then explain it to me. I ain't been with a woman since Rebecca died. 7 years, Eleanor, and you're so small, so delicate. I'm afraid I'd hurt you, afraid I'd lose control. Eleanor's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. I trust you. You've had plenty of opportunities to hurt me, and you never have. This is different. How? Because, Garrett said roughly, his other hand coming up to cup her face. Because I want you so badly it scares me. Because every night I lie awake knowing you're 10 feet away, and it takes everything I have not to go to you. Because you've woken something in me I thought was dead, and I don't know what to do with it. Eleanor's heart soared. Then don't fight it. Let yourself feel something again. What happens when the snow melts? When you can leave? What if I don't want to leave? Garrett's thumb stroked her cheek and Eleanor shivered. You say that now. I'll say it then too. Garrett, I have nothing. No family, no money, no prospects. Vernon made sure of that. But here with you, I feel rich. I feel wanted. Please don't send me away. Eleanor, Garrett whispered, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if he expected her to pull away. But Eleanor pressed closer, her arms wrapping around his neck as far as they could reach. Garrett groaned and deepened the kiss, one hand tangling in her hair while the other splayed across her back, holding her against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you, he murmured. You saved my life. I'd say that earns you a few points. He huffed a laugh. Eleanor Hartley, you're going to be the death of me. I certainly hope not. I just got you back to the land of the living. This time his laugh was real, and Eleanor smiled against his chest. She could feel the tension leaving his body, the walls he'd built around his heart starting to crumble. So what happens now? she asked. Garrett pulled back to look at her, his expression serious. Now I court you proper. No rushing, no impropriety. I want to do this right. We're snowed in together in a one-room cabin. I think propriety sailed away with the storm. Don't care. You deserve to be courted like a lady, and that's what I'm gonna do. Eleanor's eyes stung with tears. No one's ever treated me like a lady before. Then it's about damn time someone did. True to his word, Garrett courted her. He sat with her in the evenings, reading aloud from his few books. He taught her to play checkers and pretended not to notice when she cheated. He braided her hair in the mornings with surprising gentleness, his big fingers careful not to pull, and he talked about Rebecca and Sarah and the pain of losing them, about the war, where he'd served as a sharpshooter and seen things no man should see, about his dreams of building this mountain homestead into something real. Always wanted more cattle, he said one night. Maybe some chickens, a bigger barn, a real house instead of this cabin. It's a good dream, Eleanor said. Would be better with someone to share it with. He looked at her meaningfully. If she was willing. Eleanor's heart raced. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Garrett took her hand in his much larger one. Eleanor, I know we ain't known each other long, and I know I'm no prize, but I can promise you this. I'll work hard, I'll keep you safe, and I'll never, ever abandon you the way that bastard Vernon did. Garrett, let me finish. He took a deep breath. I ain't saying I'm ready to call what I feel love. Not yet, but I care about you more than I thought I could care about anyone again. And I think, given time, it could grow into something real, something lasting. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. You're offering me a future. I'm offering you a partnership, a home, a place where you belong. His grip tightened on her hand. Will you stay? Not because you got nowhere else to go, but because you want to? Will you build this life with me? Yes, Eleanor whispered. Yes. 1,000 times, yes. Garrett's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Eleanor felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Safety, home. When the snow melts, Garrett said into her hair, we'll go to town, get married proper, with a preacher and everything. I don't need fancy. I do. I want everyone to know you're mine. Want it legal and binding. He pulled back to look at her. That all right with you? Eleanor nodded, too happy to speak. Good. Garrett kissed her forehead. Now, I think it's time for bed. You sleep in the bed, I'll take the floor like always. Garrett, we're getting married. Surely not until it's proper, he said firmly. I got 7 years of wanting built up, Eleanor. Once I have you in my bed, I ain't gonna be gentle. I ain't gonna be patient. So we're waiting until we're married, and that's final. The heat in his eyes made Eleanor's stomach flutter. I see. And besides, Garrett added, his voice dropping lower, the anticipation will make our wedding night that much sweeter. Eleanor's face burned. You're a wicked man, Garrett Bishop. You ain't seen nothing yet, sweetheart. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of happiness Eleanor had never known. Garrett was affectionate but respectful, stealing kisses but never pushing for more. They worked together during the day and sat together in the evenings, planning their future. I want chickens, Eleanor said one night, and a garden. Tomatoes, beans, maybe some herbs. Whatever you want, Garrett agreed. I'll build you the biggest hen house in Colorado if it makes you happy. I don't need big, just ours. Ours, Garrett repeated like he was testing the word. I liked the sound of that. During those weeks, Eleanor learned more about the man she was falling in love with. She learned that he carved small wooden animals in the evenings when he thought she wasn't watching, that he sang softly to the horses when he thought no one could hear, that he had a wry sense of humor buried beneath his gruff exterior. One afternoon, while Eleanor was kneading bread dough, Garrett came in from the barn with a strange expression on his face. What is it? She asked, wiping flour from her hands. Come see something, he said, offering his hand. Eleanor followed him outside, curious. He led her to the barn, and there, in a corner stall, was a nanny goat with 2 newborn kids. Oh, Garrett, Eleanor breathed, kneeling down to look at the tiny creatures. They're beautiful. Thought you might like fresh milk, Garrett said, looking pleased with himself. Traded for her last fall. Been waiting for her to kid. Looks like the timing worked out. Eleanor stood and threw her arms around his neck. You're wonderful. Do you know that? Garrett's arms came around her waist. Just trying to make you happy. You do. Every day you do. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Eleanor felt heat spread through her body. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. 3 more weeks, he muttered. 3 more weeks until I can make you mine properly. I'm already yours, Eleanor whispered. Not the way I want, not yet. He stepped back, putting distance between them. Go back inside before I forget I'm supposed to be a gentleman. Eleanor smiled and returned to her bread, but her heart was racing. The anticipation was almost unbearable. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Eleanor asked the question that had been on her mind. Garrett, what was Rebecca like? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice soft with memory. She was small, like you. Dark hair, brown eyes, laughed easy, loved hard, met her at a church social when I was 23. I was working as a ranch hand then, didn't have 2 coins to rub together, but she didn't care. Said she could see I'd make something of myself. She was right, Eleanor said. Maybe. We got married 3 months after we met. Her father thought she was crazy, marrying a poor cowboy, but Rebecca was stubborn. When she set her mind to something, that was that. He smiled sadly. Sarah was born a year later. Tiny little thing with her mama's eyes and my dark hair. Rebecca used to sing to her every night, lullabies, hymns, whatever came to mind. You must miss them terribly every day. But he looked at Eleanor. It's different now. The pain's still there, but it don't consume me like it used to. You've given me something to look forward to instead of just looking back. Eleanor moved to sit beside him on the floor, leaning her head on his shoulder. Thank you for telling me about them. They're part of who I am, part of what made me. You deserve to know. He wrapped an arm around her. And Eleanor? Rebecca would have liked you. She always said I needed someone who wouldn't let me brood too much. I'll do my best to keep you from brooding. I believe you will. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire crackle. Outside, the wind had picked up again, but inside the cabin, all was warm and safe. The days took on a rhythm. Eleanor would wake first, stoking the fire and starting breakfast while Garrett checked on the animals. They'd eat together, then spend the day working on various projects. Garrett was building new shelves for the cabin, and Eleanor was sewing curtains from fabric she'd found in his trunk. Where did this come from? She asked, holding up a beautiful piece of calico. Rebecca bought it before she died, Garrett said quietly. Was going to make a dress, but never got the chance. Seems right that you should use it. Eleanor's eyes stung. Are you sure? I'm sure. She'd want it used, not sitting in a trunk gathering dust. So Eleanor made curtains, and when she hung them in the window, the cabin looked more like a home than it ever had. Garrett stood back and surveyed them with satisfaction. Makes a difference, he said. Woman's touch. Just wait until I really get started, Eleanor teased. I have all sorts of ideas. I bet you do. But he was smiling. Just don't change too much. I like some things the way they are. One afternoon, Eleanor was outside feeding the chickens when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her heart jumped into her throat. Who would be coming up here? Garrett emerged from the barn, his hand resting on the rifle he always kept nearby, but he relaxed when he saw the rider. It's all right, he called to Eleanor. It's just Thomas. The rider turned out to be a weathered man in his 50s, with a grey beard and kind eyes. He dismounted and clasped Garrett's hand warmly. Garrett, been too long, friend. Thomas, what brings you up the mountain? Heard you had company. Thomas's eyes twinkled as he looked at Eleanor. Wanted to see for myself if the rumors were true. Garrett sighed. News travels fast. Small town, big gossip. Thomas approached Eleanor with his hat in his hands. Thomas Brennan, ma'am. I run the trading post in Silverpine. Known this stubborn mule since he first came to these parts. Eleanor smiled. Eleanor Hartley, soon to be Eleanor Bishop. So it's true. Well, I'll be damned. Never thought I'd see the day Garrett Bishop took another wife. Thomas clapped Garrett on the shoulder. Congratulations, my friend. It's about time. Come inside, Garrett said gruffly. Eleanor made apple pie yesterday. Over pie and coffee, Thomas regaled Eleanor with stories of Garrett's early days in the territory, how he'd shown up right after the war, silent and haunted, how he'd worked harder than any man Thomas had ever seen, saving every penny until he could buy this land, how the whole town had mourned with him when Rebecca and Sarah died. Thought we'd lost him for good after that, Thomas said quietly. He disappeared up this mountain and barely came down except for supplies. But it looks like you've brought him back to the living, Miss Eleanor. She has a way of doing that, Garrett said, looking at Eleanor with such warmth that she blushed. Before Thomas left, he pressed a package into Eleanor's hands. Wedding present, he said. "Just a little something from the store. Welcome to the community, Mrs. Bishop." After he rode away, Eleanor opened the package to find a beautiful wool shawl in deep blue. "He's a good man," Garrett said. "He cares about you." "Yeah, when I first came up here, after I lost them, Thomas used to ride up every week just to check on me, make sure I hadn't done something stupid. I wasn't always grateful for it at the time, but looking back," he shook his head, "he saved my life in his own way. Then I'm grateful to him too." That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay in the bed, listening to Garrett's steady breathing from his bedroll by the fire. The wind rattled the shutters, and snow began to fall again. Lighter this time. "You awake?" Garrett's voice came from the darkness. "Yes, can't sleep." "Me neither." There was a rustling sound as he sat up. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. The wedding, our future, how different my life is now compared to 3 months ago. Happy different or scared different?" "Happy," Eleanor said without hesitation. "Scared too, but in a good way. The kind of scared that comes with new beginnings." "I know what you mean." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped. "What is it?" "I'm not good at expressing feelings. Never have been. But I need you to know. What I feel for you, it's real. It's not just gratitude or loneliness or convenience. When I look at you, I see my future. I see home." Eleanor sat up in bed, her heart pounding. "Garrett, let me finish. I know I said I wasn't ready to call it love, but I was lying to myself. I love you, Eleanor. I think I started loving you the moment you told me you trusted me. And it scares the hell out of me, because I know how much it hurts to lose someone you love. But I'd rather have whatever time we get together than spend another day without you." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. "I love you too, so much it sometimes feels like my heart can't hold it all." "Come here," Garrett said roughly. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She climbed out of bed and went to him. Garrett pulled her down onto his bedroll, wrapping her in his arms and the blankets. "I ain't gonna do anything improper," he murmured against her hair, "but I need to hold you tonight. Need to feel you close." Eleanor snuggled into his chest, feeling safer and more loved than she ever had in her life. "This is perfect." They lay together, talking softly until the early hours of morning, about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears, about the life they wanted to build together. "I want a big family," Eleanor confessed. "I was so lonely as an only child, especially after Mama died. I want our children to have siblings, to never feel alone the way I did." "How many children are we talking?" Garrett asked, amusement in his voice. "I don't know. 4, 5? 5 children." He whistled softly. "Gonna have to build a bigger house. Is that a yes?" "Sweetheart, I'd give you 12 children if that's what you wanted, long as you're the one having them with me." Eleanor laughed and kissed his jaw. "I love you, Garrett Bishop." "Love you too, Eleanor, more than I ever thought possible." As dawn broke, they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, still fully clothed, but closer than they'd ever been. The final week before the wedding flew by. Garrett worked on finishing the new shelves and started sketching plans for additions to the cabin. Eleanor cleaned and organized, wanting everything perfect for when they returned from town as husband and wife. 3 days before the wedding, Eleanor woke feeling ill. She barely made it outside before she was sick. Garrett found her sitting on the porch step, pale and shaking. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "I don't know. My stomach just—" Eleanor pressed a hand to her belly. "Maybe something I ate." But it happened again the next morning, and the next. Eleanor's monthly courses were late too, she realized. Very late. "Eleanor," Garrett said gently on the 3rd morning, holding her hair back as she was sick again. "Is there any chance you could be with child?" Eleanor froze. "But we haven't. We've been so careful." "I know, but sometimes these things happen anyway." He helped her sit up, wiping her face with a damp cloth. "How late are you?" Eleanor counted back. 6 weeks, maybe 7. "That night, when we fell asleep together, we didn't do anything," but Garrett's expression was troubled. "Did we? I was so tired, and you were so close, and—" Eleanor's mind raced. She remembered waking in the middle of the night to find herself pressed against Garrett, his arms around her, both of them still clothed, but there had been a moment, half asleep, caught between dreams and reality, where the line had blurred. Had they? She honestly wasn't sure. "I don't know," she whispered. "It's possible. We were both asleep, and I remember something, but I thought I was dreaming." Garrett sat back on his heels. "A baby? Are you angry?" "Angry?" He looked at her in surprise. "Eleanor, no. Surprised, maybe. Worried about what people will think, definitely. But angry? Never." He took her hands in his. "We're getting married in 3 days anyway. If there's a baby, then there's a baby. We'll just have to deal with gossip for a while. People will count, Eleanor said miserably. They'll know the baby came too soon. Let them count. Let them talk. I don't care. Garrett cupped her face. Do you want this baby? Eleanor thought about it. A child. Garrett's child. The beginning of the family they dreamed about. Yes, she said firmly. I do. Then that's all that matters. He kissed her forehead. Though it does mean you need to eat more and rest more, and let me do the heavy work. Garrett, I'm probably only a month along, if at all. I'm not fragile. You're carrying my child. That makes you precious. So humor me. Eleanor couldn't help but smile. All right, but you're going to be insufferable, aren't you? Absolutely. When the snow finally began to melt, revealing the first patches of brown earth, Eleanor felt a pang of sadness mixed with excitement. Their private cocoon was ending. The real world was waiting. But now they had a secret. A tiny life growing inside her that made everything feel even more urgent and precious. Nervous? Garrett asked, watching her from across the cabin. A little, Eleanor admitted. What if people judge me for moving so fast, for living with you before we were married, and if they find out about the baby? Let them talk. I don't give a damn what anyone thinks. Garrett crossed to her and tilted her chin up. You're gonna be my wife. That's all that matters. And if there is a baby, then we've been blessed. Simple as that. What about Vernon? He might still be in the area. Garrett's expression darkened. Oh, I'm counting on it. Got a few things to say to Mr. Vernon Cobb. Garrett, don't do anything that'll get you arrested. Won't lay a hand on him, Garrett promised. But he's gonna know exactly what kind of man leaves a woman to die in the snow. And he's gonna know that you're protected now. That if he ever comes near you again, he'll answer to me. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Eleanor's heart swell. My hero, she teased. Damn right, Garrett said, and kissed her soundly. The trip to Silver Pine took all day through the melting snow. Garrett insisted Eleanor ride while he walked alongside the horse, leading it through the treacherous terrain. They stopped several times to rest, and each time Garrett made sure Eleanor ate something and drank water. You're fussing, Eleanor said, but she was smiling. Get used to it. You're carrying precious cargo now. When they finally crested the last hill and saw the town spread out below, Eleanor's stomach knotted. Silver Pine was larger than she'd expected, with a main street lined with shops and businesses. She could see people moving about, going about their daily lives, and soon they would all know about her. Ready? Garrett asked. As I'll ever be. They rode into town together, and immediately people began to stare. Eleanor knew what they saw. A tiny woman wearing men's clothes, riding beside a mountain giant who rarely came to town. The gossip would start within the hour. Garrett didn't seem to care. He helped Eleanor down from the horse and kept his hand on the small of her back as they walked to the general store. Mrs. Patterson, the owner, gaped at them. Garrett Bishop? That really you? Afternoon, ma'am. I need to buy some things for my fiancé. The word fiancé caused a stir among the other customers. Eleanor felt her face heat. Fiancé? Mrs. Patterson's eyes nearly popped out of her head. Since when? This is Eleanor Hartley, Garrett said firmly. She's going to be my wife soon as we can get Pastor Williams to perform the ceremony. She needs a proper dress, women's things. Whatever she wants, put it on my account. Eleanor tugged his sleeve. Garrett, I don't need... Yes, you do. He looked down at her, his expression softening. Let me do this, Eleanor. Please. How could she argue with that? Eleanor let Mrs. Patterson lead her to the women's section, very aware of the whispers following them. Mrs. Patterson proved to be more understanding than Eleanor expected. Once they were alone among the bolts of fabric and ready-made dresses, the older woman's expression softened. Don't mind them, she said quietly. Small town. Big mouths. They'll find something else to gossip about soon enough. I'm sure they will, Eleanor said, trying to sound confident. Garrett's a good man. Lost so much, that one. If he's ready to try again, then you must be special. Mrs. Patterson pulled out a lovely blue calico dress. This would look beautiful with your coloring. An hour later, dressed in a simple but pretty blue calico dress, Eleanor felt almost human again. Garrett's eyes widened when he saw her, and the look on his face made every whisper worth it. You're beautiful, he said simply. It's just a dress. No, you're beautiful. The dress just helps everyone else see it. Eleanor's eyes stung. Thank you. They spent the rest of the afternoon making arrangements. Pastor Williams, a kind elderly man with white hair and gentle eyes, agreed to marry them that very Sunday. "I've known Garrett since he came to these parts," the pastor said, shaking Eleanor's hand warmly. "Been praying for years that he'd find peace again. Looks like those prayers have been answered. I'll do my best to make him happy," Eleanor promised. "I can see that you will, my dear. I can see that you will." The boarding house owner, Mrs. Chen, a Chinese immigrant who'd come west with her late husband during the gold rush, rented them separate rooms without comment. She was a practical woman who'd seen enough of life not to judge. "Breakfast is at 7, she said. "Wedding Sunday, you said? I'll make sure there's a cake." "That's very kind of you," Eleanor said, surprised. Mrs. Chen smiled. "Anyone who can bring a smile to Garrett Bishop's face deserves a proper wedding cake. Besides, I like weddings. They give me hope." As evening fell, Garrett walked Eleanor to her room. The hallway was narrow, and they stood close together outside her door. "You all right?" he asked. "I know today was a lot." "I'm fine, better than fine." Eleanor smiled up at him. 3 more days, and I'll be Mrs. Garrett Bishop. Can't come soon enough." Garrett cupped her face in his hands. "You sure about this? About me? Because once we're married, I ain't ever letting you go." "I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He kissed her then, deep and slow, and Eleanor felt heat pool in her belly. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "Sleep well, Eleanor. I'll see you in the morning." "Good night, Garrett." She watched him walk down the hall to his own room, already missing his presence. Only 3 more nights of sleeping alone. Then they'd be together forever. The next morning, Eleanor woke to gentle knocking on her door. She opened it to find Mrs. Patterson standing there with a basket. "Morning, dear. I brought you some breakfast. Thought you might like to eat in your room. Avoid the breakfast room gossip." Eleanor's eyes misted. "That's very thoughtful of you. I also wanted to talk to you, woman to woman." Mrs. Patterson came in and set the basket on the small table. "About your wedding night." Eleanor's face flamed. "Oh, I know the basics," my mother explained. "I'm sure she did. But there's knowing and then there's knowing, if you catch my meaning." Mrs. Patterson sat down and patted the chair next to her. "Sit, child. Let me give you some practical advice." What followed was the most mortifying yet helpful conversation Eleanor had ever had. Mrs. Patterson was frank but kind, explaining things Eleanor's mother had never mentioned. By the time she left, Eleanor felt better prepared, but also more nervous than ever. "Don't worry," Mrs. Patterson said at the door. "Garrett's a good man. He'll be gentle with you. Just relax and trust him." Eleanor spent the rest of the morning exploring the town. It felt strange to walk freely, without having to account for every minute to Vernon. She visited the dry goods store, the post office, even the small library housed in the back of the church. At noon, she met Garrett at the hotel restaurant for lunch. He stood when she entered, and Eleanor's heart swelled at the gesture. Vernon had never stood for her. "How was your morning?" Garrett asked as they ate. "Enlightening," Eleanor said, thinking of Mrs. Patterson's talk. "Yours?" "Productive. Talked to Thomas about selling some of my furs. Got a good price. Also ordered supplies for the spring planting. Already thinking about the garden? Someone promised me tomatoes and beans," Garrett said with a slight smile. "I aim to deliver." After lunch, they walked through town together. Garrett showed her the places that would become important to her. The doctor's office, the trading post, the feed store. People stared, but Garrett ignored them, keeping Eleanor close to his side. They were passing the saloon when a familiar figure stumbled out. Vernon Cobb. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Vernon looked worse than the last time she'd seen him. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes rumpled, and he reeked of whiskey even from 10 feet away. Garrett's body went rigid beside her. His hand moved to rest on Eleanor's lower back. Protective and possessive. Vernon saw them and sneered. Well, if it ain't the ungrateful little thief. I knew you'd turn up. Come to apologize for stealing from me?" "The only thief here is you," Garrett said coldly. "You stole 3 years of this woman's life, worked her like a slave, then threw her away when you were done with her." Vernon's face reddened. "She's lying if she told you. She told me you left her in a snowstorm to die," Garrett interrupted. 20 miles from town, no coat, no food, no horse. Is that the truth?" A small crowd had begun to gather. Vernon shifted uncomfortably, aware of the watching eyes. "She's an adult. I didn't owe her." "You owed her basic human decency." Garrett's voice cracked like a whip. "She's the daughter of the woman you married. She nursed you through sickness, kept your house, and asked for nothing, and you repaid her by leaving her to freeze." I had a right to make my own choices, and I got a right to make sure everyone in this town knows what kind of man you are. Garrett stepped forward, and Vernon actually backed up. Eleanor's gonna be my wife come tomorrow. That means she's under my protection now. If you ever come near her, if you ever speak her name, if you so much as look in her direction, you'll answer to me. Understood? Vernon glanced around the saloon, seeing only hostile faces. The miners might not care much about propriety, but they understood the code of the frontier. You didn't abandon women and children. That was low, even by rough standards. Fine, Vernon muttered. Keep her. She ain't worth the trouble anyway. Garrett's fist connected with Vernon's jaw before Eleanor could blink. Vernon went down like a felled tree, blood streaming from his split lip. That's for leaving her to die, Garrett said quietly. Be grateful it ain't worse. He turned to Eleanor, his expression gentling. Come on, sweetheart, let's get out of here. Eleanor let him lead her out, very aware of the approving murmurs following them. When they were back on the street, she turned to Garrett. You didn't have to hit him. Yes, I did. Some things require a physical answer. Garrett flexed his hand, wincing slightly. Worth it, though. Your hand is fine, he smiled at her. Feel better, knowing he won't bother you again? Eleanor nodded. You really would protect me from anything, wouldn't you? Anything and everything. That's what husbands do. We're not married yet. Technicality. Garrett pulled her close. Far as I'm concerned, you've been mine since I pulled you out of that snowdrift. Eleanor laughed and let herself lean into his strength. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. Sunday dawned bright and clear. Eleanor woke with butterflies in her stomach and dressed carefully in the new white dress Mrs. Patterson had helped her pick out. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and pretty, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. When Eleanor looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. Gone was the exhausted, hollow-eyed woman Vernon had abandoned. In her place stood someone who looked alive, hopeful, loved. A knock on the door revealed Mrs. Patterson herself, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. Thought you might want these, the older woman said gruffly. And maybe some help with your hair? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. That's very kind of you. Well, any woman who can tame Garrett Bishop deserves a little help on her wedding day. Mrs. Patterson bustled in and began pinning up Eleanor's hair, weaving the wildflowers through the dark strands. We weren't sure we'd ever see him smile again after losing his family, but you've done the impossible, girl. I didn't do anything special. You loved him. That's plenty special. Mrs. Patterson stepped back to admire her work. There! You look beautiful. That man of yours won't know what hit him. Mrs. Chen knocked next, bringing in a tray with tea and toast. Eat, she said firmly. Wedding nerves or not, you need your strength. Is it that obvious? Eleanor asked, accepting the tea gratefully. Every bride gets nervous, it's natural, Mrs. Chen smiled. But I've seen the way that man looks at you, like you hung the moon and stars. You'll be fine. After they left, Eleanor sat alone with her thoughts. Today, she would become Mrs. Garrett Bishop. She would promise to love and honor a man she'd only known for a few months. It should feel rushed, impulsive, foolish. Instead, it felt exactly right. Another knock. Eleanor? Garrett's voice, rough with emotion. Can I come in? Isn't it bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony? Don't care about luck, need to see you. Eleanor opened the door. Garrett stood there in his best clothes, hair neatly combed, beard trimmed, looking more handsome than Eleanor had ever seen him. When his eyes landed on her, his breath caught audibly. Eleanor, he whispered, you're too much? I know the dress isn't fancy. Perfect. You're perfect. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. I came to give you something. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small blue stone. It was my grandmother's, Garrett said quietly. Only thing of value my family ever had. Been carrying it around since Rebecca died. Couldn't bear to look at it, but I want you to have it. Want you to wear it and know that you're not just getting me. You're getting my family, my history, everything I am. Eleanor's tears spilled over. Garrett, I can't... Yes, you can. Please, Eleanor, let me do this right. Let me give you something beautiful. She held out her hand, and Garrett slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. How did you know my size? I pay attention. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. Ready to do this? More than ready. They walked to the church together, and if it broke tradition, Eleanor didn't care. She wanted to arrive at her wedding on Garrett's arm, wanted everyone to see them as the partnership they were becoming. The small church was surprisingly full. It seemed half the town had turned out, curious about Garrett Bishop's wedding. Eleanor spotted Thomas Brennan in the front row, grinning broadly. Mrs. Patterson dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Even some of the miners from the saloon had cleaned up and come. Pastor Williams smiled at them both. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When it came time for vows, Garrett took Eleanor's hands in his and spoke from the heart. "Eleanor, I ain't good with words, but I promise you this, I'll work hard to give you the life you deserve. I'll keep you safe, keep you warm, keep you fed. I'll listen when you talk, laugh at your jokes even when they ain't funny, and stand by your side through whatever life throws at us. I'll be father to our children, however many God sees fit to give us. I'll never, ever abandon you. You're mine now, and I take care of what's mine." Eleanor's tears flowed freely. "Garrett, you saved my life in more ways than one. You showed me I was worth saving, worth caring for, worth loving. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your comfort. I'll build a home with you, share your dreams, and remind you every day that you deserve happiness too. I'll be a good mother to our children and a good wife to you. I'll never let you be alone again. From this day forward, you are my home." Pastor Williams's own eyes were suspiciously bright. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Garrett, you may kiss your bride." When Garrett's lips met Eleanor's, the small crowd erupted in applause. The kiss was tender and full of promise, and when they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pastor Williams announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Garrett Bishop." More applause. Eleanor turned to face the congregation, still holding Garrett's hand, and saw nothing but friendly, welcoming faces. Whatever gossip had existed before, it seemed the wedding had silenced most of it. Afterward, there was a simple celebration at the boarding house. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself, providing not just a cake, but also sandwiches, cookies, and punch. The townspeople mingled and chatted, and Eleanor found herself surrounded by well-wishers. "Welcome to Silverpine, Mrs. Bishop," said the doctor, a stern-looking man with kind eyes. "If you need anything, my door is always open. My shop has fabrics on special next week," Mrs. Patterson added, "for when you're ready to make curtains or new dresses." Thomas Brennan pulled Garrett aside, pressing an envelope into his hand. "Wedding gift," he said gruffly. "Store credit. Get whatever you need for that homestead of yours." "Thomas, you don't have to." "I know, I want to. You're family, Garrett. And now Eleanor is too." As evening fell and the guests began to leave, Garrett pulled Eleanor aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Bishop?" "Mrs. Bishop." The name sent a thrill through her. "More than ready." They said their goodbyes and collected their few belongings from the boarding house. Mrs. Chen pressed a basket into Eleanor's hands. "Food for the journey," she said, "and for breakfast tomorrow. You'll want to sleep in." She winked, and Eleanor blushed furiously. They rode through the twilight, Garrett's arms secure around Eleanor as she sat in front of him on the horse. The mountain air was crisp and clean, smelling of pine and new growth. "Happy?" Garrett asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good, because I plan to keep you that happy for the rest of our lives." When they finally reached the cabin, the sun had set completely, leaving the world bathed in silvery moonlight. Garrett dismounted and lifted Eleanor down, but instead of setting her on her feet, he carried her to the door. "What are you doing?" Eleanor laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold. It's tradition." He pushed open the door and carried her inside, setting her gently on her feet. The cabin was just as they'd left it, but somehow it looked different now. It looked like home. Garrett locked the door and turned to face her. The look in his eyes made Eleanor's breath catch. "Eleanor," he said, his voice rough with desire, "I've been patient, been respectful, but we're married now. And I need you to understand something." "What's that?" He crossed to her in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. "I've wanted you for weeks, dreamed about you, ached for you, and now that you're finally my wife, I don't know if I can be gentle." Eleanor's heart raced. She thought of Mrs. Patterson's practical advice, of the nervousness that had plagued her all day. But looking into Garrett's eyes, she saw only love and tenderness beneath the desire. "I don't need gentle, Garrett," she said softly. "I need you." "You sure? Because once I start, I won't be able to stop." In answer, Eleanor reached up and pulled his face down to hers. The kiss was explosive, all the pent-up longing of the past weeks pouring out. Garrett groaned and lifted her, carrying her to the bed that was now theirs. "Tell me if I hurt you," he murmured against her lips, his hands already working at the buttons of her dress. "Tell me if it's too much. I will. But Garrett, stop worrying. Love me." And he did. His hands were reverent as he undressed her, his voice a constant murmur of praise and reassurance. When Eleanor trembled with nervousness, he slowed down, kissing her softly until she relaxed again. "That's it," he whispered. "Trust me, sweetheart. I've got you." Eleanor did trust him. Even when the initial pain made her gasp, Garrett's gentleness never wavered. He moved slowly, carefully, watching her face for any sign of distress. And gradually, the pain faded, replaced by sensations Eleanor had never imagined. "Garrett," she breathed, her fingers digging into his broad shoulders. "I know," he murmured. "I know, sweetheart. Let go. I've got you." When it was over, they lay tangled together, both breathing hard. Garrett gathered Eleanor close, pressing kisses to her hair, her forehead, her cheeks. "Did I hurt you?" he asked softly. "A little at first, but you were so gentle, so patient." Eleanor traced patterns on his chest. "Is it always like that?" "Better, usually. First time's always rough, but we have our whole lives to practice." Eleanor smiled against his skin. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." Garrett's arms tightened around her. "Eleanor, I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone again." "I love you too, Garrett, so much." They lay in comfortable silence, listening to the wind whisper through the pines outside. Eventually, Eleanor's breathing evened out, and Garrett realized she'd fallen asleep. He looked down at the woman in his arms, his wife, and felt something shift in his chest. For 7 years, he'd been half alive, going through the motions, but never really living. Eleanor had changed all that. She'd brought light back into his world, given him a reason to hope again. "Thank you," he whispered, though whether he was talking to Eleanor, to God, or to Rebecca for giving him permission to love again, he wasn't sure. Maybe all three. He closed his eyes and let himself sleep, truly at peace, for the first time in years. Spring came to the mountains, melting the last of the snow and bringing new life to the land. Eleanor planted her garden, while Garrett expanded the barn. They worked side by side, building their future one day at a time. The morning sickness continued through April, confirming what they'd suspected. Eleanor was indeed pregnant. Dr. Harrison, the town physician, confirmed it during a visit to Silverpine. "Baby should come in late October, early November," he said, making notes in his ledger. "You're young and healthy, Mrs. Bishop. I don't foresee any problems, but I want to see you monthly until your 6th month, then every 2 weeks after that." Garrett, who'd insisted on coming to the appointment, looked pale. "What if something goes wrong? We're 20 miles from town." "I'll teach you what to watch for," Dr. Harrison said kindly. "And when Eleanor's time comes, you can either bring her to town to stay with Mrs. Chen, or I'll ride up to your place. We'll make it work." On the ride home, Garrett was unusually quiet. "You're worried," Eleanor said. "I lost Rebecca to childbirth complications with Sarah," Garrett admitted. "Nearly lost them both. The thought of going through that again, of possibly losing you." Eleanor twisted in the saddle to look at him. "You won't lose me. I'm stronger than I look, and Dr. Harrison said I'm healthy. Rebecca was healthy too, until she wasn't." Eleanor took his hand. "Garrett, I can't promise nothing will go wrong, but I can promise I'll fight with everything I have to come back to you. Our baby needs both of us." "I know. I can't lose you, Eleanor. I survived it once. I wouldn't survive it again." "Then we'll make sure you don't have to." As the weeks passed, Eleanor's body changed. Her belly began to swell, and her dresses no longer fit properly. Garrett insisted on riding to town to buy fabric, and he sat patiently while Mrs. Patterson measured Eleanor for new dresses with room to grow. "First baby?" Mrs. Patterson asked, even though she already knew the answer. "Yes," Eleanor said, one hand on her slightly rounded stomach. "You'll do fine, dear, and you've got a good man who'll take care of you." She glanced at Garrett, who was examining bolts of fabric with intense concentration. "That one would move mountains for you." "I know," Eleanor said softly. "I'm very lucky." The garden flourished under Eleanor's care. Soon they had fresh lettuce, radishes, and herbs. Eleanor canned vegetables, pickled cucumbers, and made preserves from wild berries Garrett helped her gather. "You're nesting," Garrett teased one evening, watching her organize the pantry for the 3rd time that week. "I'm preparing," Eleanor corrected. "When the baby comes, I want everything ready." "Baby's not coming for another 5 months, sweetheart." "I know, but it makes me feel better to be prepared." Garrett pulled her into his arms. "Then prepare away. Long as you don't overdo it. He was constantly watching her, Eleanor noticed. If she lifted anything heavier than a bowl, he was there to take it from her. If she looked tired, he insisted she rest. It was sweet, but also occasionally frustrating. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she protested when he refused to let her carry a basket of laundry. "Don't care. You're carrying precious cargo." Garrett: "Nope. My baby, my rules. You rest, I'll work." Eleanor wanted to argue, but the concern in his eyes stopped her. He'd lost so much already. If being overprotective helped him feel more in control, she could live with it. In June, Eleanor felt the baby move for the first time. She was sitting on the porch, shelling peas, when she felt a flutter in her belly like butterfly wings. "Garrett!" she called. He was at her side in seconds, looking alarmed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. The baby moved. Give me your hand." She placed his large palm on her belly and waited. There, another flutter. Garrett's eyes widened. "Is that the baby? Our baby?" His expression transformed from worry to wonder. He knelt in front of her, both hands now on her belly, and when the baby moved again, he laughed. "Hello in there," he said softly. "This is your papa. Can't wait to meet you." Eleanor's eyes misted. "You're going to be such a good father." "Hope so. Lord knows I'm terrified." "You love this baby already. That's all that matters." As summer progressed, Eleanor's belly grew more prominent. The baby was active, kicking and tumbling at all hours. Some nights Eleanor couldn't sleep because of the movement, and Garrett would rub her back and talk to her belly, trying to soothe their restless child. "Your mama needs sleep, little one," he'd murmur. "Give her a rest." Sometimes it actually worked. Garrett continued to expand their homestead. He built a chicken coop and acquired 6 laying hens from Thomas. He added a room onto the cabin, a nursery for the baby, complete with a cradle he'd carved himself from pine. "It's beautiful," Eleanor said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "When did you make this?" "Been working on it in the barn. Wanted to surprise you." "I love it. I love you." "Love you too, sweetheart. More every day." In August, they made another trip to town. Eleanor was visibly pregnant now, and she noticed the approving looks from the townspeople. A baby legitimized their rushed marriage in the eyes of the community. Mrs. Patterson pulled Eleanor aside in the general store. "How are you feeling, dear?" "Tired. My back aches constantly, and the baby seems to think my ribs are a drum." "That's normal. My last one was a kicker, too." She handed Eleanor a small bottle. "Raspberry leaf tea. Drink a cup every day from now until the baby comes. It'll help with the delivery." "Thank you." "And Eleanor," Mrs. Patterson's expression grew serious, "don't let Garrett's fear become your fear. He's been through trauma, but your birth doesn't have to be like Rebecca's. Every woman is different. Every birth is different." "I'll remember that." That evening, as they camped on the trail back home, Eleanor brought up something that had been on her mind. "Garrett, if the baby's a girl, I'd like to name her Hope." "Hope," Garrett repeated. "Why?" "Because she represents our hope for the future. Because we both refuse to give up, even when things looked impossible, and she's the result of that hope." "And if it's a boy?" "James, after my father." Garrett nodded. "Hope or James Bishop? I like both of them." They lay under the stars, Garrett's hand on Eleanor's belly, feeling their baby move. "Whatever happens," Eleanor said quietly, "I want you to know I don't regret any of it. Not the snow, not Vernon's cruelty, not any of it, because it brought me to you." Don't talk like that," Garrett said roughly. "You're going to be fine, both of you." "I know, but just in case." "No, I'm not entertaining that possibility. You're going to survive this, and we're going to raise this baby together, and we're going to have a long, happy life. That's the only future I'm accepting." Eleanor smiled in the darkness. "All right, love, whatever you say." September brought cooler temperatures and the first hints of fall color. Eleanor was huge now, uncomfortable and ready for the baby to come. She'd taken to wearing Garrett's old shirts because nothing else fit. "You're beautiful," Garrett insisted when she complained about feeling like a whale. "I'm enormous." "You're carrying our child." "Nothing more beautiful than that." Eleanor was preparing dinner one evening in late September when she felt a sharp pain in her back. She gripped the counter, breathing through it, and waited for it to pass. It didn't. Another pain, stronger this time, radiating around to her belly. "Garrett," she called, trying to keep her voice calm. He was there instantly. "What is it?" I think it might be time." Garrett went pale. "But you're not due for another month." "Babies don't always follow schedules." Another pain gripped her, and Eleanor gasped. Garrett sprang into action. He settled Eleanor in bed. then ran to saddle his fastest horse. Dr. Harrison had said he'd come when needed, and Garrett intended to hold him to that promise. "I'll be back as fast as I can," he promised, kissing Eleanor's forehead. "You hold on, you hear me? I'm not going anywhere," Eleanor managed. "But Garrett, hurry!" He made the 20-mile ride in record time. Dr. Harrison took one look at his face and started gathering his supplies. "How far apart are the pains?" "I don't know. I left as soon as they started." "Then we'd better move fast. First babies can take a while, but early ones can be unpredictable." They rode back through the gathering dusk. Garrett's mind raced with terrible possibilities. What if the baby was too early? What if something was wrong? What if Eleanor? No, he couldn't think like that. When they reached the cabin, Garrett burst through the door to find Eleanor pacing, one hand on her back. "About time," she said through gritted teeth. "Another contraction, just..." "Oh!" Dr. Harrison took charge immediately. "Garrett, I need hot water, clean towels, and then I need you to stay out of my way. I'm not leaving her. You can stay, but you do what I say when I say it. Understood?" Garrett nodded, already moving to heat water. The next several hours were the longest of Garrett's life. Eleanor labored through the night, and despite Dr. Harrison's assurances that everything was progressing normally, Garrett couldn't shake his fear. He held Eleanor's hand, wiped her face with cool cloths, and murmured encouragement, even as his own heart threatened to pound out of his chest. "You're doing so good, sweetheart," he said. "So strong. I'm so proud of you." "Easy for you to say," Eleanor panted between contractions. "You're not the one. Oh God, here comes another one." As dawn broke, Dr. Harrison checked Eleanor again and nodded with satisfaction. "Almost time to push, Mrs. Bishop. You're doing excellent." "I don't feel excellent," Eleanor groaned. "I feel like I'm being torn apart." "That's normal. Your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do." When Dr. Harrison finally told Eleanor to push, Garrett held her against his chest, letting her grip his hands with bruising force. "That's it," he encouraged. "You're so strong, Eleanor, so brave. I love you so much." "Love you too," Eleanor gasped. "Even though you did this to me." Despite the terror of the moment, Garrett almost smiled. And then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only half an hour, a baby's cry filled the cabin. "It's a girl," Dr. Harrison announced. "A healthy baby girl, born a bit early but perfect nonetheless." Eleanor collapsed back against Garrett, exhausted and weeping. Garrett was crying too, he realized, tears streaming down his face as Dr. Harrison cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a blanket. "Here she is," the doctor said, placing the tiny bundle in Eleanor's arms. "Your daughter." Eleanor looked down at the red, squalling infant and laughed through her tears. "She's beautiful. Garrett, look at her." Garrett leaned over Eleanor's shoulder to see the tiny face, scrunched up in protest at being born. She had dark hair like him and Eleanor both, and when she opened her eyes briefly, they were dark blue. "Hello, Hope," Eleanor whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Hope, their daughter, the physical manifestation of everything they'd been through, everything they'd built together. Dr. Harrison examined Eleanor and declared her healthy, much to Garrett's relief. "You did beautifully, Mrs. Bishop. Rest now, while I show your husband how to care for the baby." Over the next hour, Dr. Harrison taught Garrett how to change a diaper, how to swaddle, how to tell if the baby was hungry or tired or just fussy. Garrett listened intently, committing every word to memory. When Eleanor woke from a brief nap, she found Garrett sitting in the rocking chair he'd made, holding Hope and singing softly to her. The sight made her heart swell to bursting. "You're a natural," she said quietly. Garrett looked up, his expression one of pure joy. "She's perfect, Eleanor, absolutely perfect, just like her mother." Dr. Harrison stayed for 2 days, making sure both Eleanor and Hope were stable before he felt comfortable leaving. When he finally rode away, Garrett and Eleanor stood on the porch with Hope bundled between them. "We did it," Eleanor said softly. "You did it. I just held your hand." "You did much more than that." Eleanor looked up at him. "You gave me a reason to fight. You and Hope both." Garrett kissed the top of her head. "Let's get you both inside. You need to rest." The next weeks were exhausting but wonderful. Hope was a good baby, sleeping in 3-hour stretches and nursing well. Garrett doted on both his girls, barely letting Eleanor lift a finger. "You just had a baby," he insisted when she tried to do laundry. "Let me handle it." "Garrett, I'm fine. Women have been having babies and getting back to work for centuries. I don't care about other women. I care about you, and you're resting." Eleanor learned to pick her battles. As the years passed, the Bishop homestead grew. More cattle, more chickens, a bigger house built with Garrett's own hands. 2 more children joined Hope, a son they named James, and another daughter they called Rose. Garrett never did become a man of many words, but his actions spoke volumes. Every morning he kissed Eleanor before heading out to work. Every evening he came home and lifted his children onto his shoulders. Every night he held Eleanor close and whispered how much he loved her. And Eleanor, who had once been left to die in the snow by a man who should have protected her, now lived surrounded by love and warmth and family. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Garrett took Eleanor's hand. "You know what I think about sometimes?" he asked. "What's that?" "That snowstorm, the one that brought you to me." He shook his head. "If Vernon hadn't abandoned you, if I hadn't been checking my traps that day, if any of a dozen things had gone differently, but they didn't," Eleanor said firmly, "and we found each other. That's all that matters." "Best thing that ever happened to me," Garrett said, "finding you half frozen in that snowdrift." Eleanor laughed. "Only you would call nearly dying the best thing that ever happened. Well, it brought me you, brought me all this." He gestured at their children, their land, the life they'd built. "So yeah, best thing ever." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Garrett Bishop." "Love you too, Eleanor Bishop, more than words can say." And as the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Eleanor reflected on how far she'd come, from abandoned and alone to cherished and loved. From having nothing to having everything that mattered. Sometimes, she thought, the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best ones. Sometimes, being left in the snow is exactly what you need to find your way home. The end.